Hey, good day, everybody. This is the season 2 for Third Party Threat Hunters. Today's guest is Paul Kurtz, a friend of mine from way back in the OG times for TPRA. Paul is a leader in the space. He's going to do his own introduction, but I also know him from as a former board member for TPRA. And then I signed the funny story I have about you is, and I love telling the story because it's a good story. I met Paul at one of the first TPRA conferences. He asked me if he could sign my book, and it was the first book, the white book. And so Paul brings it up. He's clearly read it, right? And it's dog eared, and it's got post-it notes on it, and he's apologizing, like, "I'm sorry, it's in such bad shape." And I'm like, "No, you don't understand, Paul. As a content creator, this is not what I want to see when somebody has me sign it, because that means it's a doorstop, right? It's just going to go in the door. Please read it, right?" So anyway, so that's my story about Paul. It's a great story, Paul. I appreciate that. You're one of the first people, by the way, to ever ask me to sign it, which is always a great pleasure. So I'll turn it over to you to do your thing.
I sound like a total fanboy. Greg,
No.
obviously a pleasure. And I enjoy our conversations on and off camera, but yeah, so I'm Paul Kurtz. I've got a 30+ year career in financial services primarily, and I've done just about everything you can. I started off in retail loss prevention and moved into banking and fraud investigation and just kind of progressed naturally. But the last 14, going on 15 years now, I've been focused on third-party risk management. So it's been something I kind of latched onto a little bit later in my career, but it's been a great way to try to close it out. And I've enjoyed learning and coming up in the discipline with everybody else. So it's been fun.
Good. Thanks. So we'll do the 5 quick questions we ask every guest to kind of get to know them a little bit outside the space a little bit. So this question is inside the space, but just interesting. So what was your specific pain point in the TPRM process at First Century Bank where you currently work? And not asking for any inside baseball with that, but what first to look into AI training? I know you've taken my AI training. Perhaps it was the discount I gave you a little bit, but apart from that, you're like, wow, this is more than I think it originally was. Turn it over to you.
So, like a lot of things, I'm a late adopter and stuff. And you and I have had this conversation. I try to tell people this when I speak or when I'm having, talks with peers. I am not a cybersecurity specialist. I am not a technology specialist. I consider myself an AI generalist. So I've always been in kind of a second line of defense role managing TPRM frameworks. And as new risks come up, I try to at least get a baseline knowledge of them, because my main go-to is to rely on the SMEs within my organization, the subject matter experts that are going to kind of take the lead in assessing risks. But I feel like I have to have at least a broad knowledge and understanding of what those risks are, what contributes to them, how severe they can be, how to look for them, how to be that effective challenge that we hear about in the regulatory environment. So AI came up, and I'll admit I didn't know a lot about it. And there's so many things out there about how to use it and what it is. But what attracted me, other than the discount that you gave me, was the fact that you were looking at AI within the framework of third-party risk management. I mean, it's called AI for third-party risk professionals, right? So it really put it in perspective for how I needed to understand AI, and, the rest just went from there.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest cultural hurdle you face when trying to introduce AI-based tools in a traditional banking environment, which I've worked in finance most of my life too. It's fairly conservative, and
it is.
We're reluctant to try new things to some extent.
I think, it's the same as we've seen in a lot of other areas and new technologies and everything. I think one, it's the change management aspect of it. Again, like me, these people are financial professionals. They're not necessarily AI people. They're not necessarily risk people. And so when you introduce these types of things, I think getting them comfortable with what's happening and what their role needs to be, I think is first and foremost. And I think the second thing is always cost. I mean, these things aren't free. So you've got to understand them well enough to do your due diligence if you're going to be using a tool to pick the right one. And then you also have to know enough about it to know how your third parties are using it so that you can understand that threat. So I think it's that double-edged sword of, yes, this is a tool for us, but it's also a potential threat for us. And so we've got to balance those two and understand, the lines and where they blur.
They're two sides of the same coin, I think, for the AI tools, aren't they?
Yep.
When you look at the landscape for vendor risk, what is the one thing you think banks should be that should or must be automated immediately?
Yeah. So I think, banks kind of were the leaders with third-party risk management when the whole thing came up. We kind of were the forefront because the regulatory environment put us there, right? I think there's a lot of industries now that are starting to catch up, and I think it's bled over into other areas. But I think the one area for the financial services area that I think we've got to work on from the perspective that you're talking about is ongoing monitoring. We tend to, in so many ways, be set it and forget it, kind of do a
Totally.
one-time assessment and think you're fine. And I think there's a lot of new tools out there now, especially utilizing AI, that can help you keep your finger on the pulse of the relationship, not just from a performance perspective, but from a broader risk perspective, where they can use their tool to go out and look for cyber threats, look for financial changes, and instead of that kind of manual phishing process, it's more of a, hey, look at this. It may be something, it may not, but at least let's alert you to it and
Yeah.
let you make that decision.
Yeah, agreed. The tools are able to do stuff at scale that wasn't possible just a few years ago. And
Yep.
I used to have to build, business intelligence front ends to do this. Now you can have stuff out of the box almost. So that's a good point. Let me ask you some fun questions. So beyond sort of this professional hustle you have with finance and TPRM, what do you do to recharge and kind of just reset your batteries?
Yeah. I mentioned we were setting up. So I moved from my regular office today down to my happy place. So I'm in my basement now at home, and you can see behind me is part of a bourbon collection. So I'm kind of a bourbon
Nice.
collector. A bourbon. Well, yeah, I did a count right before we came on, and I've got close to 150 bottles open and out. And then that doesn't count probably another 50 or almost 60 underneath that are spares that aren't open yet.
Favorites, in
So,
case you run out.
right, you never
Yeah,
know.
you never know. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's kind of
That's
this is my happy place. I come down and I do tastings and I have friends over and I share. I don't flip, I don't sell. It's all for, the joy of and the art of distilling.
Distilling. All right. So if you weren't working in finance and money wasn't an object, so income, you weren't worried about how much you could make or how many bills you could pay. What would be the one thing you'd want to do if you could start over and do a new career?
So originally, my degree is in criminal justice. I wanted to go into law enforcement. I wanted to be specifically federal. I wanted to be a deputy U.S. Marshal,
Good for you.
and that kind of just when I got into banking, was doing fraud investigations. I was working with federal law enforcement who was like, how do I get in to do what you do? And I'm thinking, maybe I'm looking at this backwards. I got better hours, better pay, better benefits. Nobody's shooting at me. So maybe I'm going to stay here and see what this brings. So that's
You
kind
looked
of
at it
my,
theologically, Paul.
right, exactly. That was the original thing. But now, and as I look toward my retirement here, that's kind of on the horizon, if I could do anything I wanted, and I tell my wife this, if she would let me, we would move to Kentucky and I would actually work for a distillery and give tours. There's a great documentary about bourbon where they show some of this, and then I've been on some of these tours, and I think to be able to go up there and turn something that you're passionate about as a hobby into like just a way to spend time or make a little money, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that just a quick side note that the distilleries in Kentucky and stuff are really struggling right now because people are drinking less instead of. So you might stand out if you go visit actually once you're ready to do that.
True.
Okay, let's get into the meat of the subject. So the hook this time is going to be on TPRM front lines. Paul, you're on the front lines at First Century Bank. You say second line, but it's really the front lines. Where the stakes for vendor risk are incredibly high. We constantly told that AI will solve all our TPM problems, magically go away. But in practice and implementation, it's often messy. If you were taking another bank's risk lead today, what is the one real world challenge with AI assisted risk assessments that nobody's talking about, but everybody's feeling?
I think generally there's two things that stick out. One, there's still a long way to go, right? This is still
Mm,
fairly relatively new technology, and we're still trying to figure out how to use it. New companies are popping up almost daily where they're utilizing AI as kind of that face of the industry. But being in it as long as I have, people reach out to me through LinkedIn and through other contacts and say, hey, we've got this great new tool. And I really don't have time to look at all of them because there's so many popping up. But the key is that there's still a little ways to go on this. There's still ways to perfect it and make sure it's working right. And then I think the second thing is kind of related to that, and this is not a magic bullet. This is not going to solve everything. Everybody freaks out because they think that AI is going to take jobs away. And you and I have had this conversation where, that's what they said when computers came out. That's what they said when the internet came out. That's what they said when cloud computing came out. And really all it did
cars,
was, right?
automobiles, everybody. I mean,
You
it's
name
always
it.
created new
Robots.
jobs, more
Correct.
opportunities, right?
Correct.
I think the doomsayers are looking at the wrong end of the mule, as my grandpa used to
Right.
say.
But it's a tool that can be used. And so I think you're going to have to adapt a little bit, but it's not going to, it's not going to be where financial institutions or other companies can hire AI and just get rid of their staffs. I mean, that's not going to happen.
No. And in fact, I had a conversation with another guest. I think the way the AI automation tools are going to help is TPRM teams have traditionally been very understaffed. It's what we often complain about or convention about, right? Is I don't have enough people to do the number of assessments and stuff that I need to get done to do my work. Well, these tools can give you the productivity and visibility that you wouldn't have gotten previously, and you possibly could do it with fewer staff. It doesn't mean that they need to reduce the staff more. It just means the staff that's left can possibly get a better job done with fewer people, because the machines are telling you, if you've trained them correctly, this stuff is not stuff you care about. This is the stuff you should care about. And that's always the stuff that, Paul, you and I've talked about. And when I've taught, you shouldn't spread yourself out like cookie peanut butter. You want to do a risk-based approach. That's good. That's a great point. All right, big question number one for you is the training to execution gap. So you've gone through AI training for TPRM professionals. You've done other training with me as well, and I know you've done other training on your own outside of my training. Looking back at your workforce before and after that training, what is the one concrete way you approach to evaluate a vendor's risk posture that has changed? Anything that you took out of that class that you thought you really kind of walked away with and said, okay, this is something I could use new? Hopefully I did. And then by the way, I didn't presuppose this question, everybody. Paul can say no, it was a complete waste of my 4 hours. So let's hear what he has to say.
It was a train wreck. No. So for me, again, me not understanding AI, I took the class so that I could learn the AI's impact in our industry and specifically how it can benefit us, how it can hurt us. And the main thing I took away was now that I have to really go back to my vendor population and try to understand who's using AI, and more important, how they're using AI. And then you gave me some of the tools to use. We talked about frameworks. We talked about questions to ask. We talked about safeguards and things of that nature. So that gave me that foundation to go back and kind of build out, because we were already asking about AI in our InfoSec questionnaire, for example. It's a questionnaire, but we also do other things. But we were already asking about it. But I kind of went back and was able to beef that up and say, now, not only are you using it, but how are you using it? Where are you using it? What data is used, all the questions that we talked about. So that was, I think, the key thing. And now I've got that insight to say, okay, we might need to dig a little deeper here and not here. Some of the recent classes and conferences and everything I've gone to, I think people get hyped up into this thing of, if any third parties are using AI, then you need to be scared. Not really, right? I don't really care that one of my vendors is using Copilot to take notes in their internal meetings. Right? If they're not making decisions or don't have access to client data or doing things that could impact my business, I may still want to know about it and I want to monitor it to make sure that scope doesn't change. But I'm not going to your point, I'm not going to waste time on those when I've got somebody that's using AI to create a model that we use to make decisions, or that is using AI to talk to clients of ours in chatbots or whatever the case may be. Those are the areas that I want to focus in on and say, okay, how does this work? And what safeguards do you have in place? And what do I need to know? What do my SMEs need to know from a compliance perspective? Because that's the other thing that people forget about. They tend to put AI in the cybersecurity or information technology bucket, but it reaches everything. I mean, there's legal implications, there's compliance, there's privacy, there's InfoSec, all those other things. So it's a very broad kind of impact that AI can potentially have. And I was able to now to go through and help those people understand, here's where it could impact us. And we start that conversation, and that's the key.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I ended up writing the book. Was originally I kind of thought of AI as just another risk in this space, and you would just lump it in with cybersecurity as part of that cybersecurity risk. It's actually its own risk. It's a new risk. It's got its own frameworks, like cybersecurity has its own frameworks. And while for example, I have the third-party cyber risk assessor training, right? I'll probably have to update that with some AI, but it won't be heavy AI, because AI will have its own course because of just the amount of material it covers.
That's
right.
Exactly.
It's not just another risk. It's a new capability and technology that adds a boat. I was going to use the bad word, a boatload of new risks. Right. So that's great. All right. Big question number two.
That kind of ties into something else that we talked about was, what does that mean? That means there's a whole cottage industry developing out there that people now can set up companies that do AI assessments that can come up with the frameworks. So it's creating opportunities as well
Yeah.
as kind of helping people, to your point, do more with less. So
One of one of the contracts I've gotten the last couple of years that I didn't expect when I first started the consultancy was training AI. So having companies come to me and say, "Hey, we're training agents to behave like an assessor or a cyber engineer. Can you evaluate, make sure it's making the right decisions?" So that's an opportunity I wouldn't have thought about, just 2 years
exactly.
ago. All right, that's great. Thanks. Big question number two is operationalizing AI in banking. In banking, the regulators are rightfully cautious. Sometimes overly would be the word I would use. But how do you balance the need for rapid AI driven vendor risk insights with rigorous compliance and audit standards required by finance, not just your institution, but any finance, right? How do you
Yeah,
sell the speed of AI to stakeholders who are obsessed with safety or not obsessed with safety, actually, in some ways? The regulators are generally always day late and a dollar short. They usually are fighting the last regulatory thing that happened as opposed to what's going to be happening.
coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's generally been my experience. What's your experience been, and how do you think it really is butting heads to some extent?
It is. And again, this is not new territory, right? We've been through this in the past. And I think people that have been around long enough kind of remember those conversations, and they're going to be very, very similar to the ones we have to have now. I think key to that is staying connected to how the regulators are thinking about it. And we're starting to see more of that coming out. I'm involved in an ABA, American Bankers Association AI working group, where not only are we coming up with tools, TPRA is coming up with tools, things like that, but the regulators are now kind of asking other questions and asking for that input. And I think somebody asks you a question, it's your opportunity to give the answer that you need to give and that you think they need to hear. And so I think the more that we communicate and keep those lines of communications open and help the regulators understand how this can be beneficial and how we can manage it properly, just like we have to manage everything else properly, I think that's going to help. And I think from a speed versus safety, you have to help everybody understand that, again, it's a tool like any other. It's not the end all be all. It's not, you push a button, everybody goes home into their bourbon collection and forgets about work and AI takes over. It's a tool that's going to help people be more productive. I guess the first thing that I would say if a regulator expressed concern to me is that this is going to help me find the things that I need to care about from your perspective. It's going
Mhm,
to
mhm.
help me spend less time doing the day-to-day mundane tasks and the reactive check the box exercises. And it's going to help me focus in on the things that it identifies that are true risks. And now I can be proactive and get the right people at the conversation, determine, is it a risk that impacts us?
Yeah.
How big, if so? And then what do we do about it? I think the good news is with the current administration, I think regardless of how you feel, they're embracing it and they're trying to say, look, this is here and let's learn about it and let's work with it together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think as long as you have your process and program documented, that you can show that you assess the AI tool for your process, then the regulators generally don't have a problem with it. When you don't follow your process and they find a control breakdown, that's when they're going to be over you like white on rice. And so as long as you follow your process, you may have to alter your process now for AI, and that's what we talk about in some of the
Yeah.
training. But
Yep.
as long as you follow that process, you should be fine. If it's
That's
not
right.
in your process, you better go update it right away before the auditor, or before the regulators and auditors find it, because that's where you're going to get dinged. And I think the other thing I would say is my experience in the last 10 years or 15 years with finance and regulators is I've found them they've gotten a lot better in the last 10 years. I
Yeah.
remember OCC, FDIC, 10, 15 years ago. And I often wondered if they were even reading the stuff we sent them, because they would ask questions like, do you walk to school or carry your lunch? It was like, they're not even related. I don't understand why. I mean, yes. But I remember the last few years when I was with the banking institutions as a full-time employee, the last few years, they ask questions. They clearly are reading the material. And they seem to care. So maybe I don't know what changed. I'm glad, because frankly, it's a waste of time to do regulatory audits if you're not really doing the work. So I'm okay with it. If you thought you were going to walk through these like they used to, not so much anymore. They actually are paying attention, especially the OCC, the big banks. But the FDIC is
Yeah.
getting better at it as well.
I think that's absolutely right. I think the other thing is that people have got this kind of historical stress over, interacting with regulators. In my experience, to your point, if you can show that you've at least considered something, that you've got it in place. I always say the regulators are going to tell you what to do, but not how to do it, so that they can always come back and say, improve this, change that. But as long as you're doing the right things and kind of show that you're taking a risk-based approach and you're considering the right things and you document your processes, you document your decisions, there's a comfort level. And once they kind of understand that, I've actually physically experienced in a room with an examiner where once they kind of know that from a third-party risk management perspective, I know what I'm talking about, and this just isn't something that was given to some guy that has another job. It's like, okay, we can kind of relax here. We can ask real questions, and they're not going to smell blood in the water and just go in for an attack, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got the right people and the right attitude and the right methodologies, and you're not, they're there to do a job, and they're there to help you be safer, and just work with them. Don't work against them.
Yeah. And don't answer more than the question they asked. That's the other,
Right.
that's the other tell, right? Under the advice of counsel, you don't have to say I plead the fifth, but don't go too far afield.
Right.
Okay. All right. So the last part of the podcast report, keeping within the threat hunters theme. If you're Paul, if you had another peer from another financial institution come to you and say, hey, we want to start our AI journey with third-party risk management, what's the one small kind of low-risk project they should start with to prove that they have it under their belt? Please take my training.
To say, are you teeing this up so that I can just
I
like
actually wasn't, but I was like, that's like too. I'm sorry, wasn't really designed that way. I was actually looking for a programmatic solution, but hey,
sure,
whatever fits.
Yeah, I was actually going to say it's not really a project, so to speak, but it's exactly that. And I've got a note here: go take AI training for TPRM professionals.
Okay. And by the way, I'm not the only. Clarence Cho's got a great one out there.
Yes.
There's a free one on the TPRM site. That's a 1 hour one. Mine's 4. I think Clarence's is 2. There's some great opportunities, and they're not just mine. There's some AI training that in my book I talk about where like at Coursera and about I think Michael. There's a bunch of others that are free. I don't think.
No, take advantage of all of them. I mean, the more perspectives you get, the more information you get, the more ability you get to kind of gather information and make your own decisions. I think the better off you are. So that's first and foremost. It's kind of funny because I think there's 2 ways you can get hurt by AI. One is jumping into it too quickly and not understanding it and suffering the consequences that come with that. But the opposite of that is adopting it too late and not utilizing it, especially from a competitive advantage. You're going to be a little bit left out. I mentioned a minute ago that I've got people calling me every week saying we've got a new product, TPRM system. It's AI based. Nobody is calling me and saying, hey, we've got a great new spreadsheet for third-party risk management. Right. So it's a double-edged sword. And I think not only from the perspective that we can use it and it can be used against us, but it can be a benefit and it can be a threat. And so just learn it and then go out and partner, because that's the other great thing that I love about our industry, Greg, is that we're not sharing secrets, right? We're not marketing. We're not sales. We can get together at the different conferences and events that we are participate in, and we can share best practices. And I can ask you, hey, what do you do about this? And you're willing to tell me. You're not going to say, hey, I can't say that. So, take advantage of those opportunities, join the organizations, get a certification, contact people on LinkedIn, and then just take advantage of that network and learn and embrace it and then go forward.
Yep. So my threat hunter stake as the host is the same. I'd say take the resources that are available. A lot of them are free or near free. And if you're a fully employed, a lot of employers will pay for some of that stuff anyways as part of professional development work that they have. But like TPRA, I'll play up TPRA because I think it's a great resource for folks who are in the space, AI or not. Between templates, workshops, they do schedule events where you can get online with people in your same field. So if it's just finance, they have just a finance call where you can just talk with finance folks, and because you all have the same issues, right? So and then there's one for higher education and insurance. So again, I make use of the resources that are out there. Most of us, like Paul and myself and others, are approachable on LinkedIn. So you can DM us, and as long as you're not trying to sell us something, I'm happy to try and reply. I usually ask because 9 times out of 10, they start off really nice and then suddenly say, "Oh, well, this would help you." But if you're really wanting for help, I'm always happy to give somebody a half-hour phone call. So again, I think those are, and there's others in this industry that will help you with that. So thanks, Paul. That's great. Thanks again for joining us today, Paul. I really appreciate having you on. It's always great talking with you.
You too.
I need an excuse to get down to Atlanta to help sample some of the bourbon for you to
There
get,
you go.
you can make a dent in about 150 bottles. I'm a lightweight nowadays, so I probably won't make it very far, but I'll give it a shot. I'm an ex-Marine. I can punch my liver until it shut up.
You're always welcome and never expected.
Oh, thank you. That's really nice of you.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks again. Tune in for the next episode and do subscribe for updates on the channel. Look for bonus material and other things from other guests as well. So thanks so much. Thanks again, Paul.
Thank you.